Good evening. Welcome to our city council meetings this evening for Wednesday, October 11th. We will get started tonight with a Pledge of Allegiance. We're going to have a tag team today. We're going to do Sebastian and Sophia. We're going to do our Pledge of Allegiance. These two amazing young people are from Venezuela, going to Harriman High, so we're thrilled to have them here.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you both. Okay. Item 4.2, any city council comments or recognitions this evening?
Mr. Mayor, just a couple things to shout out to everyone involved with the preparation and organization for the Harriman Howl. That was quite an event. Record numbers of attendees and just all around great feedback. It was pretty awesome. Even some of the vendors coming in were just thrilled with the turnout, are excited to come back next year. So good to see that. On Saturday morning, I got to be a part of the NICA Division IV State High School mountain biking race event that was out there. That was awesome. It's at the Southwest Salt Lake City Trail Systems trailhead out there on soon-to-be Harriman Main Street. I have never seen so many kids on bikes. It was insane. And these are not like, back in the day, it seemed like people who rode road bikes were these skinny, wayfish, These kids are monsters, and they are all over each other. I'm surprised there wasn't more bloodshed in a bike race. It was intense. It was amazing. The parking area was absolutely full to the max. I mean, there must have been 1,000 cars out there. It's like a whole city got set up. There's tents everywhere and like little shops set up and luggage racks for kids and all their stuff. It was incredible. What a neat event to have in the city, and one of what's going to be a lot of those kind of events in the future. So just amazing. And then I also want to make a comment. The last few days have really brought some really disturbing and concerning images from around the world. Some really horrible, terrible things have happened. And I don't want to make this a political stand or have any conversation about that. I just want to say how grateful I am for those that serve in our armed forces and the police forces that we have right now that stand on that thin blue line that keep us safe every day. And we're grateful for what you do, for the bravery that you show, and for helping us protect the rights and freedoms that we enjoy every day. And I thank all of you for that. And that's all I have for tonight. Thank you.
I would just add a little to what Steve mentioned, and I too am, I don't know, shocked, dismayed, deeply saddened at the events that have happened in Israel. We talked in our work meeting about, there was a request that we proclaim a Religious Freedom Day. I believe it's in January, and we talked about that as a council, and I'll just reiterate here. I believe every day in America should be Religious Freedom Day. So I don't know that we need to make a proclamation about it, because that's in our Constitution. I don't think anyone should be persecuted for their religion, as long as that religion is not harming as far as physically killing another individual, those types of things, breaking the law. So I think it just deeply saddens me, and I'm just grateful to live in a country where those freedoms are protected. But I pray for those who live in areas that it's not protected or that it's under attack. And I hope that there's resolution soon that makes people who intently kill other people in unbelievable ways. I hope that that can come to a resolution and that can be taken care of swiftly.
I've got to give a shout out to staff and to events, and I know Wendy's hand was knee deep in it because she loves Halloween, but Monday night was truly a blast. And I was there for almost 3 hours and I still didn't get to see everything. And when they loaded up those little ride-on animals, she about lost it because she didn't get a chance to stand in line for an hour and a half. But I said, we'll go to the mall and we'll pay money to ride them. So, but it was an outstanding, amazing job. And anybody involved in that, all the way down to our crossing guards that came out, the police enforcement, traffic, it was just amazing. The whole night was. So we really appreciate that.
One thing that I think we failed to mention is that we have 2 parks employees, Mike and Amy, who grew, I think, 600 pumpkins for that event, which saved us a tremendous amount of money. So all of the pumpkins for the pumpkin walk, all the pumpkins that were around the park, they grew on a little plot of land that was just dirt with some random irrigation in it. So they saved us thousands of dollars.
I had no idea.
And Amy is the pumpkin whisperer, so she sings to them. So that's why they grow so big.
Is that a culture coin moment for them?
Pardon?
Culture coin for them?
They've already got them.
Okay.
That's awesome. Thank you for that, for staff and everybody that was involved. So.
The last comment I'll make real fast is on the 29th of September, we did hold a 5-year anniversary. Our police department turned 5 years old, and we were able to celebrate with them as we honored a lot of heroic actions. I had no idea, being only up here for a year and a half, I had no idea some of the situations that our officers have been through. It was a humbling event to be a part of, but truly grateful at the same time for them and all they do for us, as Stephen mentioned as well. But so many awards that night, but especially Marisha, we highlighted her last couple weeks ago for all she's doing as well, but we need to bring her back too, by the way. We need to schedule her a night. Will you? I forgot to mention that in there. Can we recognize her for her efforts at Copper Canyon as well as, can you work with her on that? So, but again, just happy 5-year to our police department, and we appreciate all you do.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Okay, before we go on to 5, we didn't talk about this before. Do we want to, we had talked about, and Jackie, you tell me if we can do this. Do we want to, can we move public comment on the fiber? Can we move that back to with the fiber? If we can make that motion and move that. So I would propose a motion from the council to move, if you're here for public comment regarding the fiber discussion, we would move that back to item 9.2. So we'll do a presentation and then public comment at that point. And then, I mean, you're welcome to speak now, but if you're here to speak on the fiber, we would like to move that back to 9.2. So you're speaking at that moment. So I'd look for a motion to move. Do you need a motion for that? No, we're okay. Okay, so again, if you're here for fiber, we'll ask that you hold your public comment until, well, we'll be there fast. Don't worry about that. We just would like you to hear the presentation prior to that public comment so you can hear our plan and then go from there. So at this point, anybody else, audience members may bring any item to the city council's attention. Comments will be limited to 2 minutes. State law prohibits the council from acting on items that do not appear on the agenda. Public comments for this meeting will also be conducted electronically. Any person interested in addressing the council may submit a comment by emailing recorder@harriman.org or by visiting harriman.org/agendas and minutes, where there is a link to fill out an online public comment form. Your statement will be incorporated into the public record. So at this point, if you have a public comment that is not related to the fiber discussion, you're welcome to make that now. Okay, seeing none, we will move on to item 6. We'll look for city council reports. Jared?
Not now, but next time we'll get some prior
Oh,
stuff.
it's like a telephone book.
I just got handed the proposed budget, and I've got requests for finance committee meetings, which I'm the chair of. So in November, we'll start that process again for the budget gets approved in June.
Okay. Okay, Teddy?
We meet as a sewer board next week, but again, we're going to be having some public input and public notices about our budget and fee schedule change on the district. So just to apprise you of that, so.
Okay, Sherry?
We had the Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District meeting tonight. The water usage has actually been pretty good. We're through September now, and the concern this year was because of all the water we had and all the snowpack we had, that people might revert back to old habits of watering and things like that. But we're pretty much exactly the same as we were last year for water usage. So that was really encouraging. So thanks to the public, thanks for everybody who just continues to be conservation minded, because Utah is a desert. It's the high desert, and we are going to continue to grow, and we're not going to have enough water to use it in the manner it had been being used. So I'm grateful that we continue to see people being conservation minded rather than just drought minded, because that's the change that has to be made. So that was really encouraging. We also changed a policy. The district has take or pay contracts. So if you sign up with the district for X number, say you want 100 acre feet of water a year, you pay for 100 acre feet of water a year, whether you use it or not. You can go up to 120% of your contract at the same rates you're at 100%. If you go over 120% of your contract, then you pay block 2 water rates, which are substantially higher, almost 2 times the amount. So it's to encourage cities, member agencies, to really understand what their water use is going to be, what their water needs are going to be, because as a district, we have to do our budgets based on how much money people are paying for water. So in the past, so if you go under that, you still pay. So if you only use 95% of your contract, you pay for 100% of your contract, so which is difficult to pay for water and you're not using. And what we've seen a little bit is when we're encouraging cities to really implement conservation standards and people scale back 20% on their use, but then they're still having to pay for the water they're using. So it's trying to figure out the balance there. What they can do now is up to 5%. So if they use 95%, they can carry over 5% of their contract. Sorry if I'm getting in the weeds in this. Anyway, they can carry over 5% of their contract to the next year. But they still have to pay for it. So what we're trying to do is implement some new policy that would allow them, if say there was a city that was at 110% of their contract, they went 10% over, but this city was 5% under, they could essentially sell that water to the city that went over. So there would be a water transfer to that city. So it would not end up costing you that extra, the money that the water you underused, you could allow the other entity to pay for that. Hopefully this making any sense. But or you can, again, still choose to do carryover. It just gives another tool in the tool belt of how to allocate that so that you're coming close to your contract. I know the district has reached out to a few of the member agencies, but not all of them. I know that because that passed tonight, they'll be reaching out to all of the member agencies to really go over that policy with them, help them understand it and implement it. But it'll help people to still implement conservation standards and not be kind of penalized for having to pay for it. And it will also keeps the district whole financially because we can't make a budget and then have it say, well, you don't have to pay for it. So that was kind of the big changes today for the water policy.
Okay, Steve?
Nothing tonight.
Okay, and I don't have anything to report on tonight either. So we'll move on to item 8, the consent agenda. Look for a motion. I think we all look to Steve to make sure he's not taking anything.
Motion to approve the consent agenda as written.
Motion by Steve,
Second.
second by Jared. Jared?
Yes.
Teddy?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. The motion carries. Okay, item 9.1, discussion and consideration of an enactment of City Code 714 pertaining to the dedication of public property. Todd?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Occasionally, the city receives property it doesn't want, or doesn't want quite yet. This is a problem typically where the city is anticipating certain property that needs improvements on it, but sometimes that property doesn't have the improvements and we receive it anyway, and then we get related issues to that. For example, there's been one property that had flooding issue, and then because a developer dedicated the property to us via quitclaim deed, we didn't have any knowledge of it. And we were told that, you know, this was our problem because it was runoff on city property, and we're like, well, we didn't even know about it. So we looked at Utah code to see if there was any way to prevent this from happening. There's really not any good language in Utah code. And other cities that have dealt with this issue, they've created an ordinance that lays out that there's a process for a city to receive the property, and that's what this ordinance does.
Okay,
Want a motion?
yeah, look for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance number 2023-17, enacting Harriman City Code Section 7-14 pertaining to the dedication of public property.
Motion by Sherry, second by Jared. Steve?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Teddy?
Yes.
Jared? Yes. And I'll vote yes. That motion carries. 9.2, presentation and consideration of a proposed public-private open fiber utility partnership. So again, what we'll have tonight is a presentation by Councilmember Shields. He's been kind of leading up our task force that's been looking at this for about 3 years now. And then after the presentation, we'll then open for public comment. Following those same, you'll have the 2 minutes still at that point, and then we'll turn back to council for discussion at that point. So Steve, you have 3 minutes.
Yeah, thanks. So this is, we'll try and cover a lot of information as quickly as we can. I might make fun of staff a little bit, make fun of us a little bit, but I hope we'll get to all the fun stuff. So let's see if this works. All right, so here we go. So in March of 2000, wow, it's hard to believe that was 3 years ago. March of 2000.
2000 was 23 years ago.
Sorry, 2020, 3 years ago. See, I'm already starting off with a bang here. This picture, this little thing kind of disrupted the whole world. Schools got closed, businesses shut their doors, there's fights in the street over toilet paper. Everything kind of got turned upside down because of this virus. But the impacts were because of so many people were at home, students were forced to have classes over Zoom calls, people were working remotely. We learned a whole bunch of new kinds of words. My favorite one on here is quarantine and chill, which also led to Corona babies. Just the whole world changed. We had a whole new language that we had to learn. And the one thing that really all this had in common was everything that was happening in our businesses, in our education, in our life had to be revolve around reliable high-speed internet service. And that strain on the infrastructure really showed up in the way that our residents were experiencing life. When they didn't have reliable internet service, they weren't able to work. They weren't able to have their kids get into school. City council members weren't able to connect to meetings and listen to what was going on when we had to meet remotely. And so we realized that something had to be done. And so the city started a nearly 3-year journey where we started with the Internet Task Force. And so like in every presentation we have, we need to have a timeline of where we started from and how we got here, but we'll get to that. So Councilmember Orrin and myself, along with city staff, organized a kind of a work group to identify some of these problems that we had in our community and what we might come up with for solutions. So it started with identifying what were the problems that we were trying to solve. And it quickly went from a discussion about internet to a discussion about a whole lot of things. And so we came up with a checklist of items that we wanted to accomplish. And so I'm going to read these off. So we wanted to make sure that we could provide universal access to every business and residence in this city, making sure that they had access to reliable, high-speed internet service. If it didn't get to every business and home in the city, it wasn't a good enough solution. We wanted to increase competition and offer multiple service providers in the community. We wanted to get government out of the business of picking winners and losers in communities. We wanted to hopefully lower costs. We wanted to have a broadband infrastructure that would support and enhance city operations and services. We wanted something that could be deployed fairly rapidly. We wanted to minimize or eliminate any financial obligation to the city or any financial risk to taxpayers. So I would say that I want to clarify two words. One is obligation to the city and taxpayers, and one is risk to the city and taxpayers. And we wanted to minimize or eliminate both of those things. We also wanted to make sure that there wasn't a solution that everyone was forced to accept, that there were choices. And then we wanted to make sure that there was a solution that would work for today as well as for the future. So that's a pretty big list of items that filled up the checkbox here that we had to try and meet. And so we realized that internet wasn't what we were looking for. We were looking at a much broader solution, a fiber optic network that could meet the demands of our community. So again, here's the list of things we were looking at, and here's the ubiquitous required timeline of events. As you can see, we started September 9th, 2020 was our first meeting, and here we are 3 years and 1 month and 2 days later. That's a long time frame. There have been dozens and dozens of meetings that aren't on this timeline in which we evaluated a huge spectrum of options. We were looking at what other communities had done or hadn't done. We looked at what their successes and failures were. We looked at what we could do to learn from them. And so I want to go through a couple of examples here because it starts out really easy when you start looking at cities getting involved in solutions at some of the failures. We looked at a number of them, but here's three that I'd like to kind of highlight. So first of the one that's the big failure from our own backyard here was the launch of iProvo in 2004. It was envisioned originally as a city-owned fiber optic network, but they had really high cost of infrastructure, high operation costs, and then you couple that with lower than expected subscription rates, and there were some pretty substantial financial struggles. Because of the fact that the city itself had bonded for the construction, the city and the taxpayers were liable for its success, and when it failed, they quickly tried to find a way to recover those costs. They couldn't find any buyers. Except for one, Google Fiber came in and they agreed to acquire the existing network that had been built for $1. And they left the taxpayers with a $24 million bill that the city of Provo and the taxpayers of Provo had to pay off. They did get some free service and a couple concessions from Google over time, but nevertheless, Google got off pretty good. The city and the taxpayers of Provo got the shaft in terms of the cost there. So obviously, big failure, good lessons to be learned there. The Groton, Connecticut one, the Timms Valley Communications, again, started in 2004, same time iProvo started. They were trying to provide cable television, telephone, and internet services, so they wanted a more broad spectrum of solutions. The problem is that you had a city trying to compete against private competitors for the exact same service. And again, cost of operation versus how many people were subscribing, they couldn't come up with a competitive offer in the marketplace, and they failed. And so in 2013, 7 years later, the network was sold for $550,000, which was just a piece of the millions that the city had invested. So, big problem. We look at Memphis, Tennessee, the Memphis Networks. It was a kind of a public-private partnership, one of those kind of things. And it was primarily designed around businesses. They wanted to find a solution for just businesses to help as an economic development thing in their municipality. But they weren't able to capture market share. Again, that's a continuing problem we're going to talk about. And rising debt just became unsustainable. And so in 2007, the city sold their shares in the endeavor for a huge loss. In Utah, there's one other that we could talk about, and that is Utopia. When they originally started out, really slow adoption rates, really high debt service costs, and they were on the brink of failure. They restructured and transformed the organization, figured out some ways around it. And just to point out, one of the key figures in making that transition from the brink of failure to success was a key member of our task force and a key advisor all along the way in helping us to look at some of the pros and cons of some of these things. So let's review this real quick. Here's some of the things that led to failures of these other networks. So high initial costs that was backed by the city and taxpayers. So because they took full liability for the networks and guaranteed the debt with taxpayer funds, if it didn't work, it was a gamble that the city and the taxpayers had to pay off. And again, one of the things we definitely wanted to avoid. Second thing is, in some of these instances, and there's a couple other cities that are in the report that I didn't put into the presentation, you find out that these cities just didn't really have experienced people to run or manage the network. So you're trying to build something complex like a municipal fiber network and you don't have the people to run it, you run into problems and it creates issues. The issue of a closed network. When you have government competing with private sector, that's a bad mix. Just in principle, we've talked about that numerous times. We don't want to be involved in anything where we have government and private sectors competing against each other like that. That's really not something we like. They had really poor financial models. Their plans for stability was based on huge capture rates. They didn't have a very robust model that was sustainable. And so because they didn't have subscribers to drive any revenue, they didn't have any ability to service the debt at all. The other thing is some of these networks, because they were spending so much money on the debt, they hadn't made plans to keep the network equipment refreshed. They didn't make plans to improve technology over time. And so some of those networks became obsolete. Even Google, when they came in and bought iProvo, had to make significant investments to enhance the network that had only been built a few years ago. And then another thing we saw with some of these municipal solutions, almost like Utopia, was that there was a shared debt among multiple municipalities. That was one way that communities tried to offset those costs, was share it among several municipalities, all guaranteeing each other's debts. So it was kind of almost like mutually assured destruction. But that was one of the things that we definitely wanted to avoid. So these red check marks are lessons we learned from looking at other people's failures and said, we don't want to do the same thing. But in looking at it, there's lessons to be learned from the failures, for sure, but there were also many successful examples that I think we should look at as well. Just to the north, we have Ammon, Idaho. They developed one called Ammon Fiber, and this is really considered kind of the future of municipal broadband networks because they were one of the first ones to do a utility model, and that has really made their network successful, at least financially from that standpoint. We're doing it a little different than, our proposal is a little different than what they did. but that utility model was a key piece of what made them successful. The Green Light community broadband, it's in Wilson, North Carolina. It was launched in 2008, and it was a municipal network aimed to address the lack of reliable high-speed internet in the region. Sound familiar? They provide gigabit speeds to businesses and residents, and some of the things they noticed was it really boosted local economic development and attracted a lot of new businesses to the region. It's really successfully ongoing. It's been considered a model for other cities. Chattanooga, Tennessee is probably the most successful example of a municipal broadband network. Started in 2009. It has just been amazing. They were the first city to offer gigabit internet speeds to all their residents. They had huge economic development in the area. A study from the University of Tennessee identified that over a 10-year period that it was constructed, there were between 2,800 and 5,200 new jobs created in the community, and it had an economic development impact of somewhere between $865 million and $1.3 billion. In some of them, there's another part of the report that indicated the total economic benefit of the network has been $2.6 billion and some change. When you subtract the total operating costs and investment costs over time, the net impact over 10 years for the network has been north of $2 billion. So obviously when the networks work, they're amazing and they do great things for their communities. So some lessons that we learned along the way kind of led us down a path where we wanted to look at all of the options that were available. I have this spectrum of two choices here because we went everything from completely private solutions, let the free market work it out, to what we would call completely public solutions where it is a mandatory utility, everybody's a part of it, and it's the sole provider on a network, almost like Spanish Fork would be an example of something that did that. So there's been successful examples of both ends of the spectrum, but when we were going and evaluating all of those options against our original checklist of items there, we recognized kind of some solutions we could find for the problems that we identified. So if you remember this at the beginning, those red check marks that we looked at, we realized that there's some solutions that can be found. So when you talk about the initial costs and the financial risk to taxpayers and to a city, the creation of a utility makes the finances of that operation technically separate from the city. Almost like an LLC or a corporation is a separate entity from the person who might own that company, right? So any risks that are associated with the network, any financing of the network, the bonding for it, the payments for it, any liability for it, are strictly encapsulated within the utility. And there is no risk to the taxpayers of Harriman or to the financial stability of the city of Harriman, whether or not that succeeds or fails. So isolating that from the city was a great lesson we learned. One of the things we saw was that to overcome a lack of expertise, pursuing things down through a public-private partnership allows us to hire the expertise that we don't have, to bring in people who know about running municipal networks, who have built and constructed and operated them successfully in other places, to bring that expertise to our city so we can leverage that to our advantage. One of the things we talked about was a monopolistic problem where either the city created a solution that was the only solution, or they didn't allow it to be open source, created an issue where they were competing directly against the private sector, and we saw that those led to failures in many cases. Having an open source network allows multiple competitors to come in and use the network, creating more choices for customers. In cases where you have competition over time, that usually results in improved services and lower costs. The long-term stability, we talked about how their models were based on take rates. By creating it as a utility, there's an ability to incorporate a monthly utility fee. Now, we're going to talk about this a little bit more, but the utility fee that we are proposing would be included inside of a total monthly cost. And we'll get to that here in a minute, but the utility fee would be for the hookup of the network. People would have the opportunity to get an enhanced internet service on the network for an additional charge, and we'll talk about that in just a second. Other thing is we talked about how the networks can become obsolete very quickly if they don't have the ability to refresh and upgrade. Included in our model for it is a network refresh fee that's built in, and that would make sure that equipment is upgraded and updated and improved over time. Okay, any questions so far? All right. So even though we felt like we had some good ideas and some good solutions, we wanted to go ask the community. So we did a survey, and we had almost 2,500 respondents. Now, in terms of municipal surveys, that's amazing. Generally, we would have anticipated something like 300 to 400 responses. So getting 2,500 responses showed that this was just a massive interest point for the residents of Harriman. And there were some interesting takeaways from it. I want to be clear. Even though some of these things might be assumed to be clear answers or clear directions about things, the questions they only gave us the answers to some things. They didn't answer other things. And so we don't want to make too many conclusions from this because of the way the questions were asked, but I'm just going to report what the answers to the questions on the survey were. So what we found out at the time the survey was done is approximately 85% of our residents work at least part-time at home. So there's a lot of full-time workers and part-time workers using internet services for their businesses.
What was the date or time frame of this survey? Do you remember?
That's a good question. Last summer, was it 2 years ago?
It would have been around May-ish of last year.
May
2022.
Last year, right? Yeah.
Last year.
Spring of last year, yeah. And then we reported this in a town hall meeting a couple months later. So about 70% of residents who either attend school or do learning from home, which I thought was a remarkable number. Now, I don't know if that's in their household or if that's individuals. I would think that probably represents a household that has children that are learning or a student in college. 80% of residents are paying more than $60 a month for service. 47% of residents are paying more than $80 a month. There's a small percentage that was paying some outrageous number, and I couldn't figure out what that was, but we don't know if that was maybe they were including their, like a bundled service cost and saying they were paying $200 and something for service. So not sure how accurate those numbers were, but I thought this $60 to $80 was an interesting number. Other interesting thing is that 96% of residents in the city reported that they only had 2 providers they could choose from, at the most. So there were a few that had some other choices, but most of our residents had 1 of 2 choices to pick from. When asked about the proposal that we were evaluating and some of the things that we thought we wanted to move forward on, 90% of residents expressed interest in subscribing on a city-owned fiber network. And 75% of residents expressed interest in a utility model open access network. And again, there's a question of how many residents really understood what a utility model open access network was. That's not clear. All we have is the answer to this. So again, I don't want to necessarily suggest something that isn't accurate. I only wanted to report what the survey results said. So once we got the feedback from the residents and we had kind of a plan of what we wanted to do, we issued a RFP, or an intent to negotiate a request for proposal. And we sent out and asked for private companies to come to us with solutions that might help us achieve all the goals that were on our checklist. And we received 5 responses. These are the 5 that came in. And we looked at them, we evaluated them, we talked through them, We went, back and forth on the pros and cons, and essentially, without going into all the details of all of those discussions, we settled on Strata Networks to be the solution provider, which led us to a more detailed analysis of what would that look like, what would it cost, how long would it take, what would the financial model work, what would the prices be, how much would residents pay, what would the utility fee be. So there was a lot of diligence and time put into constructing that. But on August 23rd of this year, the task force delivered a report to the City Council indicating what the cost of construction of the network would be and whether or not that price, accompanied with the financial model that we had, would be feasible. And the answers we got were favorable, that it was feasible. The network itself, the construction cost, was estimated to be somewhere around $60 million. That's a ton of money. It's definitely not something we would want to burden taxpayers with. But we did, the City Council instructed the task force to kind of do some fine tuning on the financial model to make sure that was right and look at the assumptions in the feasibility study, mainly to make sure that we anticipated a large number of opt-outs and a low number of subscribers. We didn't want to overestimate subscribers or underestimate the opt-outs and be stuck with a model that was kind of goofed up from the get-go. So now we're at a point where, as a council, we kind of have to make a final decision. We have to make a decision to form the utility, to turn the further decision-making on the bond parameters, the opt-out details, that to the utility. The City Council's going to be acting as directors of that utility to make sure that the public interest is served. But when we're in those seats, we wouldn't be working as City Council members, we'd be working as directors of the utility. So the task force is recommending that we move forward with the plan. So let's talk about a couple of the impacts that I think this will have on the community. So the advantages for Harriman are the fact that there's going to be universal access. Because it's guaranteed that there's going to be access to every residence and business, that's really at the heart of what drove our decision-making here. The private companies that want to build out networks, they really don't have the financial incentive to service all the areas of our city, and especially the old, really established neighborhoods, like where Sherry lives. There's not enough people over there to justify the cost of building fiber network just to those residents, and so they don't. The other thing is when you look at what the financial investment is over an entire city, unless there's a really high number of subscribers that they're kind of assured of getting, the private companies don't want to build the network. In some of the examples that we looked at with those RFPs, and even some current proposals that have been made to the city more recently, all of those are requiring the city to essentially be their partner, that we're going to choose one provider to come in and build a network that's closed off to all other competitors, and that would be the solution for the community. There's some real drawbacks to that in terms of lack of flexibility, a monopolistic issue, lack of competition, price controls, the city municipal services not being enhanced or having the freedom to operate the way that we want to. There's just some drawbacks from that. Not to mention the fact that there's no guarantee that they would provide it to every home and residence. Because of the fact that it's an open source network, we look to have better services and lowered costs. When there's competition and there's more people, they're going to be looking to try and obtain customers. And so we look at variability in levels of service, variability in speeds, variability of amenities that they might be able to provide, and variability in costs. The fact that it's going to be built and designed in our city and that we have control over it is a huge advantage. If it's something that's been maybe outlined or designed for a city many years ago and they're trying to reproduce that same model here, there's inherent problems in those networks. Being able to have a specifically designed network for our city at this time is a great benefit. We look at the fact that networks of these kinds are great attractants for businesses. It's an economic development tool. And I want to, again, reiterate this again. There will be no taxpayer dollars used to construct or operate the network. Zero. Nada. There will be no liability to the city or the taxpayers to have to pay any debt that is incurred to construct or operate the network. Zero, nothing. The City Council has said over and over again, we would not vote or support any plan that required taxpayer dollars, period. We've said it publicly in numerous meetings. Any information that you have had to the contrary is absolutely false, 100%. One of the things that we talked about, and if you looked at the beginning when we said it's not just about internet, is that the broadband network serves as a backbone to enhance and upgrade all the other services and utilities that the city offers. Kind of a real-time or a real-life example of that would be the SCADA system that we have on our water. Right now, the SCADA system has the ability to collect and report a great amount of data about our water system, but it's not reported in real time. What happens is we have to go around with these radio frequency transmitters that will collect a portion of the data that's collected when we go to the location. The problem is that if there's a problem in the system at that time, we don't know about it until we get a call, hey, there's a big problem in the system. Having it hooked up to a municipal network like this would allow us to monitor this stuff in real time and get the whole amount of data that's available in the systems we're already paying for. Not to mention the facts, the benefits for our police, just finding out like their body cameras, when they're out and about, they can't upload any of that data. They have to come back to the station to be able to upload that stuff. There's areas of the city where they have dead zones. They had to get these little wireless jetpack things that they have to carry around on their laptops just to make sure they have as good a service as they can get through the city, but there's still areas where it's pretty sketchy in terms of service. So being able to make sure that we have broadband throughout the city, connectivity for our police and fire, traffic impacts, air quality impacts, just on and on and on. It's a great enhancement for the municipality. It gives access to learning. With our community college campus and University of Utah campus that just got opened, we got a lot of students coming in here. They're going to be at campus, but they're also going to be doing things online and learning online. Being able to learn from home is a huge deal. I'm taking classes at home right now, and being able to do that online is awesome. And if I didn't have good service, I wouldn't be able to do that. I won't talk about all the other things that we can go here, but there are two things that I want to talk about. Number one is that even with the introduction of a monthly utility fee, and this is what I was kind of deferring from our earlier conversation. The monthly utility fee is estimated to be approximately $15. I don't want to say approximately and estimated, that's probably an understatement. It's going to be $15. That $15 fee, when combined with an enhanced internet cost, the total amount is going to be somewhere around $75 to $80 a month. That's about 1.5 gig service up and down. There's no throttling or congestion because of the way the network's constructed. So it's a pretty cost-effective price point for the level of service that's given. For most residents, that's either going to be a cost savings or they're going to see an enhancement to the service they're already getting.
Just to clarify that for a second, that total price that you're referencing is an estimate on what the private providers would charge for the service. The city's not providing that
That's
service or
right.
charging that fee.
There's a wholesale cost.
Choose whoever you want, and that's the cost. That's just what the consultant is estimating those companies would
Yeah,
charge
we've been
for their
hearing,
service.
private, on other municipal networks, cost between as low as $68 up to in the upper 80s. And they have different things that they're offering and different speeds and different
It'd be
equipment.
competition amongst those providers and levels of service. That part has nothing to do with what the city's proposing.
That's right.
That's enabling that level
That's
of,
based
that
on
service
the
and,
feedback
that
we're
service
getting.
and price competition
Yeah.
is up to them. This is just an estimate of what we think they would charge.
Because they have to pay a wholesale fee. Explain that to
Yeah.
them.
So every internet service provider that wants to be on the network will pay a wholesale cost. You can look at the modeling that we've done. That wholesale cost is something around $65 all in. Now that $65 includes the $15 utility fee, a network refresh fee, network operating fee. Just all of that stuff is broken down into that $65. The $75 to $85 above and beyond that, that's the money that the private network providers earn on a monthly basis from you. So the total $80 a month cost pays for service, refresh fees, utility fee, the whole 9 yards. So I don't want people thinking that saying you're going to have your internet plus another $15 fee on top of all that other stuff, making an $80 fee a $95 fee. That's not how this is going to work.
But you might have just a $15 fee if.
Yes. Now, because of the benefits that it makes to the community overall, we felt very comfortable recommending this as a public utility. And because of the utility fee, every home and business will have the opportunity to be hooked up. They will have a connection to their house unless they opt out of the network. So there is the option to say, I don't want anything to do with this, I want to opt out. And if you don't opt out, the cost to bring it to your house is included. It's paid for in that monthly utility fee. You'll be charged $15 a month, and for that $15 a month, you'll get a basic level of service. It'll be 10 megabit connection. It's enough to do email. Sherry doesn't get 10 megabit, and she watches Netflix at her house.
I actually lived through COVID with 10 meg, and I was able to join many Zoom calls. I wasn't able to video stream myself, which is probably good for everybody in the audience, but you can function on 10 meg. It's not preferred, but it's a pretty good deal for 15, because I can promise you I was paying more than $15 and getting that speed.
Right. The other thing is that we have already been told from some of the competitors that operate inside of our city, some of the private companies, they intend to slash their rates because they don't want you to subscribe to the new network. But I want you to understand, when you get a lower bill, they didn't lower your bill. The city building the network lowered your bill. They're not just doing it out of the goodness of their heart because they're interested in you. They're doing it because they're interested in stopping competition. But with the prices that they're saying they're going to be cutting to, if you kept your service that you already have and paid the $15 utility fee, you're still getting a cost savings. So there's a net benefit to pretty much every resident of the city. The higher speeds are really exciting. I was reading an article the other day that said using a fiber optic network, they were able to get speeds of 319 petabits per second. So to put that into perspective, that's about 319 times faster than the fastest networks that exist right now. It's just fiber optic works at the speed of light. And as far as we know, there's nothing faster than the speed of light. So a fiber optic network is the superior technology that exists in the world today and should be the superior technology for the next 40 to 50 years. But even with the network that we have and the technology that exists today, there would be very little cost over time to turn this 1.5 to 2.5 gig network or 10 gig offering for some businesses or some enhanced stuff into a 40 gig network pretty easily. So again, if you go back to our beginning when we said solutions for today and in the future, the ability to have a network that can be upgraded that much over time is pretty impressive. The other thing is, as I want to talk about the long-term focus of the network, is that private internet service providers and private network owners are driven by quarterly profits. They have shareholder interests that they have to meet. And so their pricing and what they do is based on generating profits for shareholders. As a municipal ISP, that wholesale rate is not designed as a profit center. It's designed to generate enough revenue to service the debt. More people sign up, the debt gets serviced faster, the debt retires. Now that $15 that was being used as a utility fee to help pay the debt is no longer needed to pay the debt. I can't promise you that it will go away, but what I can tell you is there's no incentive to keep that utility fee any higher than what it needs to be. Because there's already a network refresh fee built in. There's already going to be millions of dollars accumulating to upgrade and improve the network over time. An extra $15 isn't needed. I can't promise you that that will be eliminated, but that $15 could be used to offset increase in refresh costs or network costs over time. It's not likely that, at least from the wholesale cost, that there would be any price changes for any foreseeable future. As to what internet service providers charge, the fact that it's open source and there's competition helps keep that in check, right? There's not one company who's going to say, yeah, we want to charge you $150 a month now. Somebody else can come in and charge $120, and there's a race to the bottom for prices. So in conclusion, as a task force, we are highly recommending the opt-out utility model through a public-private partnership with Strata Networks to build and operate this network. The utility, having it as a separate entity, ensures that taxpayers and the city aren't liable, and it keeps the costs of that separate from the city. I don't know how much I can re-articulate that again and again. So I would ask if the council has any questions that I can answer right now. If not, I think we could open it up for public comment.
Let's do it. Thank you for the explanation, Steve. Presentation, you went over your 3 minutes by 43 minutes. I wasn't counting.
I know. I know that's a long presentation.
It was very useful, very helpful.
But it was so important to make sure that everybody understood the background, the history, how we got here, why we're making the decisions we're making, what the real impacts are, what the real costs are going to be, how that's going to impact everybody. So that's why it was such a lengthy.
Nope, we appreciate it. Nope, thank you so much. So again, I have 3 comment forms. If you are here and want to make a comment, please, if you will fill this out, it's in the back corner, and then hand it to our chief over here. He'll make sure he gets it up to me. So again, I've just got the 3 so far. Any additional comments, please get that to chief here. So we'll start with Kyle Hamilton.
I won't be very long, but
Kyle, can you pull the microphone down? I'm sorry. You're the first.
Sorry?
Can you pull the microphone down? Oh, there we go. Thank you, Kyle.
Steve said, it even in the comments here, that this is not a tax, but $180 is a tax. It doesn't matter whether it's a fee or what it is. A rose by any other name is still and he had pretty much admitted that it's not going away. So it's a tax. And you can call it whatever you want to, but it's a tax. But I think some of this money could be better used in our police department and probably in our fire department. I know the roads need a lot of work to them. I know there's roads around that haven't even been paved, that need to be paved, that have been promised to the homeowners that they would get them paved. So maybe they ought to think about distributing some of this money for the homeowners that are, have to live on these homes and things like that. And as far as opting out, how do you go about opting out? And why does it cost so much more if you opt out and then decide later on that maybe it'd be useful for you? Maybe later on somebody wants to open a business that they don't have now, and what internet they're using is totally sufficient. And they come along and open a business later on, and then it's going to cost them thousands of dollars to come back in and hook onto the fiber. I don't understand why they can't figure something out if they're going to do that, to give people a chance to come and hook onto it, just like if it was in this era, regular, like any other internet service. They don't charge you an exorbitant fee to come in and hook on just because you didn't get it on when they were here or when they came through the first time. So.
Thank you. Thank you, Kyle. Do you want to address that,
Sure, if I
Steve?
might.
Yeah,
Normally
please.
we don't
Do
do
you want to?
Can I take a stab?
Yeah, go ahead.
for it. I got a couple answers for you.
Right, so my response to a couple of those questions is, one, a tax is something you have to pay without any choice, right? A tax is something that you have to pay without any choice. That's your privilege for living somewhere, is that government entity takes a tax and decides what to do with it, and you speak through, it's my turn to talk, right? In this case, you can opt out. No one, and that's the thing, I guess, maybe to reiterate, no decisions have been made other than we're informing people we're moving down this path. This has been a 3-year process. We're taking one step at a time. There are a lot of details to work out yet. You can opt out. If you don't want to pay the fee, you don't have to pay the fee. You don't have to connect to it. Everyone will have that opportunity when there's a decision to make. How do you opt out? We haven't described that process yet. We're not to that point in the process, right? And at least in my opinion, we're quite a ways away from dotting the I's and T's on all of the minor details. This is a major detail. So the question of why more later to me, is a simple financial question. It is not, and I understand maybe the premise of your question. The answer is that it's not the same as just hooking onto a normal internet connection. There is a major construction process to connect fiber optic lines versus a wireless service or through a phone line, et cetera. There is actual construction that has to take place. Lines have to go through all of the streets, and from each line in the common street, a line has to be constructed from that line directly to your home. So there's major construction costs. So the cost to install it later is that construction cost. It's not as simple as just hooking into the existing phone line. It's a separate construction cost. So if you want to be connected from the beginning, that's built into that model, right? So the utility will go out and basically borrow money from investors. It's what I do for a living as a financial planner, right? Sell stocks and bonds, et cetera. Apple's one of the, is the richest company on earth. They still issue bonds. They still have debt on the books for lots of different reasons. So the bonds are not government bonds. They're borrowing money to construct the network. $60 million is the estimate, right? That's financed by a certain number of people paying that monthly fee. So if you're on it from the beginning, you're paying the monthly fee, and that covers your construction cost. If you choose to opt out and not be part of that financing mechanism, right, then you would pay the construction costs later if you want to connect later. That would be, it's simple as I could maybe answer those 3 questions.
Yeah, and I would describe it this way. If you have Comcast or CenturyLink right now, what do you call what you pay them every month? Is that a tax? No, it's a subscription fee. It's the same thing. If you subscribe, you pay for it. If you don't subscribe, you don't pay for it. That's what this is. That's why it's not a tax. A tax is something that we charge you whether you use it or not. This is something, if you subscribe, you get a service. You get a product. You're paying for what you're getting. If you don't want it, you opt out, you don't pay anything. Zero. So I want to make sure that's very clear. Second thing is, the questions that you raised, Mr. Hamilton, are very, very important, and a huge part of why we made the decision we're making is that there are other capital projects that need funding in our city. Roads, infrastructure, parks, on and on and on. There's just so much that has to be paid for. If the city were to bond and have this liability on the city's books, it would prohibit our ability from being able to bond to pay for other things that need to be done in the city. By making this a separate utility, that's a subscription-based debt service thing, we allow the city the freedom to continue to operate without that burden, to be able to do the things that we need to do for infrastructure, for roads, for all that other stuff. So,
But the city gets the benefit of the bond because it increases our ability on our SCADA and all those things. We get a benefit even if it's not on our books.
A definite cost benefit to the city, right? We save money. The other thing is just to make sure, the $15 a month cost over 20 years is $3,600. I think that's an important number to understand. The reason why it costs so much, why it's going to cost thousands of dollars to come back, is that they have to bring back all the equipment and everything that's required to build and construct one connection. When all the equipment's there, it's just a few dollars more to just run it at the time that they're there. But to bring all the equipment and all the contractors and all the stuff back at a future time is really expensive for a one-off thing. That's why it's so expensive to do it in the future versus doing it now. So.
I would say the last point of clarification I would make, Mr. Hamilton, too, is there's no revenue from the city right now. No money is being spent by the city. So by doing this, we're not putting off road projects or anything because the city's not going to spend any money of our money at this point, so that will not jeopardize any funding. I mean, this is going to be self-funded within its...
Yeah, it's not taking money away from police or roads or anything else.
Okay. Let's go to Boyd Hamilton.
It sounds to me like you've already made up your mind, and this is just a waste of time to come down here, because you know what you're gonna do. You said there's gonna be another board, right? There's gonna be a utility board, right? Who's gonna pay them, and how many's gonna be on it? So that's gonna force your costs up. Utilities and cities should not be intermixed. They shouldn't. This is a private entity that should come in and take care of that. You've got the options out there. Technology is changing all the time. They told me when I bought my first computer, a 286, I'd never need anything more than that. You're buying the best. You're telling me fiber optic is the best. Things are changing all the time. And I don't think the city ought to be involved in things that change, that could be done. You've been at this for 3 years. What's happened in 3 years in technology? For crying out loud, it's crazy. It's crazy. And I don't think that we should be involved in that as a city. Let the private sector come in and take care of it and do the things that they need to do. Why is this not an opt-in policy instead of an opt-out? Why don't you just go out there and say, if you want this, you opt in? Is it because you're afraid you won't get enough people to opt in to make this work? Because I read your statistics. Sherry, I've talked to you about this before, and I read everything, and everything you recommended that I read, I'd already read that. It doesn't make sense to me. It needs to be an opt-in, not an opt-out. They're two different things. Completely different. How are you going to take the widow, my mother, 93 years old, you're just going to start paying, or she's just going to start paying and she's going to complain about it. Well, Mom, you could have opted out. She didn't know. That's going to go right over her head. And most of the citizens, or a lot of the older citizens are going to be that way. I'm against it. I want you to know I'm against it. And I appreciate the work you've done on it. I do. But I'm against it because I think that I worked for Utah Power and Light for 20 years, and I saw cities that were involved in utilities, and they just didn't work as good as Utah Power, and they struggled. And you're doing the same thing with this type of a situation. You're saying that you don't have anybody that knows how to do it, so we're shooting from a hip on this. I think we need to leave it to those that have pioneered through it and let them do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Boyd.
Do you want me to explain why we're doing opt-out versus opt-in?
Hold on, Steve. Mayor, I would propose that we hear all the public comment, then take notes and rebuttal after that. That's my opinion.
Either way?
I'm okay with answering questions kind of as we go, simply because
Maybe
it
it'll
might
help
help,
other people.
might help other people. We end up with the same statements and questions over and over.
I just feel like it singles out the individual that just proposed, just spoke, more or less.
And I think, but I think these are really important questions, right? I think these are things that people need to understand. Why opt-out versus opt-in? Why did we choose that model? There's a reason for that. With the opt-in models, all of the bond companies that do it on an opt-in require taxpayer backing for those types of financing. They always require a sales tax revenue backup. That's the gamble that so many of those networks that failed did. They did opt-in and they didn't get enough subscribers and they failed. And then they left the liability to the city and the taxpayers. We did not want to have any model that created liability to the city or the taxpayers. That's why the opt-out model works, because the bonding companies will fund the opt-out model without any burden being put on the city or any obligation on city taxpayer funds. We don't have to pledge any sales tax revenue. We don't have to pledge any general fund backing for the debt. It's completely separate. The opt-out gives everybody the choice. They still do not have to have service. They have the right to choose it or not. But the opt-out model gives us the ability to bond for it outside of any obligation to the city. So that's the reason why that's the model versus the opt-in. I know that, look, there's plenty of reasons to disagree with the solution. I just want you guys to understand that for every one of these decisions that we've made, there's a reason. And the reason is we had that checkbox at the beginning of all those things we wanted to do, and this is the only one that checks all the boxes.
I would address the opt-out question too, because I think it's a question that's broad also, that people have asked the same question on emails I've received. And the answer is we don't have a definitive process on the opt-out right now. But the example that you gave as far as an elderly person or somebody that's been in our community for a long time is precisely the reason that was adamant about this having an opt-out provision. I do not want somebody on a fixed income that's 95 years old to be forced to get this. It was, and not just me, but this council. We do not want to force that on people. There are people who you think $15 isn't a big deal, but $15 can be a big deal to a lot of people. So we want to make sure as we hammer through the details on the opt-out that it is going to be clear, that we do a very good job of communicating clearly to people. And I understand exactly your point that sometimes it's hard for people to understand it, but we're going to do everything humanly possible to make sure that they understand the process and have the opportunity to opt out if that's what they choose.
So
There'll be a substantial communication blitz, information sent out in the newsletters that everybody gets every month with the water billing. There'll be information on the websites. The contractors that are going out installing will have all the information, information forms, opt-out forms. I mean, all the information will be there. So we're very cognizant of the potential negative impacts, and we're being very, very careful about how that's done.
I just want to make a comment about the decision-making process, and maybe there's confusion around that. Some decisions, I would say, have been made. Steve gave the timeline, and we've described it as different off-ramps over 3 years. We've all been public meetings, all public discussions. We've all had serious questions about opt-in and opt-out, and I can only speak for me in particular, that's a huge issue for me, and that's one thing that hasn't been decided yet, right, is what that process is. So some of the decisions made, I think, is as we continue down this path, I think we're to the point where we've made the decision to hire Strata as the consultant to advise us on what these options would look like. We've made small decisions through that consultation process of how we'd want to go about those things. I'm speaking for me. We haven't had an official council, decision that this is the final thing we're doing, because we're not at the final stage yet. There are checkpoints along the way. At least for me, I'm supportive of this general structure, right? The utility structures, there's zero risk to taxes, there's zero risk financially to the city, and no one is forced to connect. That's what I'm in favor of generally. From here, we have to iron out those fine details. What does the opt-out process look like? How do we make sure that someone in the situation that you described doesn't fall through the cracks and is stuck with this thing that they never really wanted or needed? Those are conversations we've had, and we've not made those decisions yet. We've tasked Strata and staff with bringing us suggestions and solutions for us to decide on what that process looks like. Same thing with the fees and all those other things. So there's many decisions that have been made along the way, and there are many more decisions yet to come.
And I would say in addition, Steve, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the $15, somebody for an elderly person, that could actually be a savings for them. Somebody that doesn't need more than 10 meg. Like, my grandma's coming tomorrow to town, talk to her, she's paying $75 and she doesn't ever use, that's just what's available to her. So it could actually be a savings to her. She doesn't need anything. So 10 meg, it's actually going to save her $60 a month right now for if something were like that were available where she is. So
that's true.
It could be, anyway.
It definitely could be, right? There's, if you go back to our original checklist, could you bring that back up with where we had the, maybe I didn't even have it on there, but one of the things we were talking about was choice, right? There had to be a choice. Anything that was a one-size-fits-all, everybody had to have this one solution. We were like, that would be prohibitive to what we wanted to do. And so having the choice to subscribe or not was a key part that we started with at the very beginning 3 years ago, saying you have to have the ability to choose.
Okay. Go to our next comment from Rusty Cannon.
John, I'm going to have you bring that back up at the end. There's a couple quotes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and council members. I'm Rusty Cannon with the Utah Taxpayers Association. Our name has come up a lot in this discussion online, so we wanted to clear a few things up. We've been around for 101 years fighting government expansion, whether it's taxes or budgeting or spending. Virtually every area of taxation in Utah, sales tax, property tax, income tax. We have members, over 1,000 members of our association from every sector of the Utah economy, every walk of life. We don't slink back to our office and think, oh shoot, we can't engage here because the city council's decided to call this a fee. It still comes out of the pocket of taxpayers, whatever you want to call it. There will be clear motivation to not have people opt out, or the project will fail. So how do you think this is going to work? Also, tonight, this has been an excellent presentation, completely thorough and all that, but not once have you mentioned All West Communications, giving you a proposal currently to build out 100% of the city. And I wrote down all those things on that list. Universal access, they're going to cover 100%. Increased competition, you have another provider. Government has nothing to do with it. Lower the cost. They're laying in Farmington now, where I live, at $65 a month for a gig. They're already below your price. Rapid deployment, they'll finish it faster than the government can. Financial risk, all theirs, none of yours. No one is forced. Obviously, you don't have to be a customer. And they will build it into the future. They check all the boxes. It hasn't been mentioned once tonight. But clearly the cake is baked. We'll now have another instance where elected officials are saying, with our ideas and your money, we'll do great things. And it's just something we'll just have to continue to fight. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to address a couple things. So first of all, in reference to the All West, I actually outlined their entire plan online before our last city council meeting. I explained what they were offering. I showed the options. I asked people for their feedback. This is not something that's a hidden thing from the company. We've looked at lots of different proposals. Again, what Mr. Cannon, what you're suggesting, what other people are suggesting is they want the city to pick one company and let that company come in, and that's the one we're choosing, and that company can charge you $65 or $85 or $165, and we're at their mercy. And because they got here first, and because the city partnered with them, now there's no financial incentive for anybody else to come in and build a network and compete. It simply closes the door on all future competition. So saying that the private market coming in with one solution increases competition technically is correct, but overall, it reduces the chance for future competition in our city. That's why the open source network is the superior choice completely. And one other thing, because this is really important. Everything that gets paid for, whether it's a city, a government, a road, a restaurant, a store, your clothes, the shoes, your gas in your car, whatever, it's money that came out of your pocket that paid for it. You can call it a fee, a tax, a tip, a bill, whatever you want to call it. It's money that come out of your pocket. So trying to say that we're playing games by calling it a fee or a tax or a bill or a subscriber charge or whatever is such a disingenuous argument as to be ludicrous. How dare you come in and pretend you're representing taxpayer interests when there is no taxpayer money involved in this at all? That is absolutely ridiculous, and you should be ashamed of yourself.
3 years with taxpayer money doing that. 3 years.
Okay, we're going to move on. Thank you. Next comment is Ethan Woodcox.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. I want to, first of all, just thank you for the presentation. And also, quite frankly, I'm quite happy that a member of the Utah Taxpayers Association is here, because it's nice to know who I'm draining the pocket of whenever I swipe up on the ads that they've been pushing on Meta all over the place. But as someone who has been at the mercy of a regional monopoly in the 4th District of CenturyLink, and for the 2nd District, where my brother is currently living, in Harriman, for Xfinity, this is a project that I am more than willing to voice my support for. This is something that has been, for lack of a better word, literally throttling our capability to do anything else. And with the growing amount of homeowners associations and everything else that exists in the city of Harriman, there's been a total lack of capability in the technicians that currently handle how the internet service providers maintain their lines and install them accordingly. And also their lack of technicality is the reason why we have such spotty fiber optics in the first place. So having this type of structure is perfect for this type of competition. I did have one question that's actually coming from my brother living in the 4th District, who's unfortunately out of town, so he couldn't make this comment himself. He was wondering, would the utility fee be reduced if the opt-out rate is lower than expected, or vice versa? That's all the time that I had. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ethan. I think we kind of addressed, I think that'll be in the next stage, is kind of understanding that utility fee and the timing.
That's one of those yet to be decided things.
Yeah, I guess really the important thing to understand is that utility fee and the wholesale fee, all those fees are only intended to pay the bond. They're not intended to create a profit margin or anything like that. So if we look at it and we get a lot more usage and less opt-outs, then it makes sense to adjust fees so that they're in line with making sure that it's responsibly taking care of the bond obligation. Correct? That's the way
I mean, I guess that's a discussion to have, whether or not there should be a reduction in that fee or an increase in the speed at which the debt is retired, right? There's pros and cons to both. I would say it hasn't been contemplated a reduction in fee based on subscription rates or an increase in fee based on subscription rates. This is the model, and the investors are coming in based on that model, and it will succeed or fail based on that model. So I don't think there's been any contemplation about any fee adjustments, any wholesale costs, any utility fee changes based on the success or failure of the network.
I would think, sorry, I'm just thinking and talking out loud. I would think that that's a decision that board would make in the future, right? When they have that information, and they would be able to make those adjustments.
Okay.
That's a good question, though. Yep. Something we need to consider, yeah.
Thank you, Ethan. Scott Hastings. Loving the beard, by the way. Love it. I've been admiring it the whole time.
All right. I just wanted to say thank you to the task force for the very thorough investigation and all the detail you've provided. I think the communication's been excellent. Facebook, the city website, town halls, all kinds of stuff. I've been able to learn a lot. I'm very impressed with what you've been able to develop. Check off all those boxes, and I am extremely excited because I've been frustrated a number of times with the very big lack of choice and options for internet service. And you know, they're not great, and there's not good competition for the price, and so I'm very excited to see the city addressing it. And no questions, just wanted to say thanks.
Thank you, Scott. Todd Marriott.
Just for public disclosure, Ms. Marriott was actually a member of our task force.
I just have three things, and I wanted to point the first one out as having been involved in a lot of cities across the Western United States and even the United States. I'm very impressed with the professionalism of your task force, your city council, your mayor, Nathan, your city manager. There's really not been Blake and Wendy and all of you. Just a fantastic job. It's phenomenal. Very thorough, maybe to a fault, I always say. And I think that your decision to go with Strata, probably one of the best telecommunications companies in the country, let alone the state, was well-founded. I would just say just two other comments in regards to All West. I think if All West were willing to come in, I think Rusty he misleads, of course, by saying that they're willing to build out the entire city, but where I've seen their proposal is half of what it would cost. I don't think they're going to be ubiquitous, and it's not just about whether they can provide quick internet. It's about all the other things that Steve talked about. So if they're willing to come in and guarantee all those and provide the intrinsic amazing things that this council set forward, of course that just doesn't fit in a business model, and they can't. I'm just going to say this, and I know this might come across strong, but it is my direct experience for nearly 2 decades that anytime the Utah Taxpayers Association talks, they're misleading, mischaracterizing, and is untruthful. They have cost the Utah taxpayers so much money when they mislead, because their primary focus when he comes here is not to save the Taxpayers Association taxpayer money, but it is specifically to save their top clients, because the Utah Taxpayers Association serves Comcast, CenturyLink. And I challenge them to tell me that that's not so. So I'm just saying, anytime that they come up to tell you that, they're here to cost you money and not to tell you the truth. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd. Marco Escobar.
thank you guys for the 2 minutes. I apologize if this has already been answered, so I was listening in the car, didn't hear it. Really quick, I've served on a couple of HOA boards, and only having two options, Comcast or Xfinity and Google, actually was a really hard thing in some of those boards, and it ended up costing our residents more money, so I like the options. But my question specifically revolves around low-income earners within the city. Is there something within the scope that I've missed or that I haven't read, or have you guys considered ensuring that each one of the providers that is included in this project have a low-income option? Right now, as a city, we're dealing with a large influx of immigrants, migrants that are dealing with trying to get themselves on their feet. One of the big things that we heard last Friday around that was that their children have a hard time making sure that they can do their homework at home because they don't have those options. I know Xfinity has what they call essentials, which if they are able to prove their low income, that they have an option to have some services brought to their home. Is that something that you guys are going to either ask for, have considered, or will be including in the project? That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco.
Yeah, Margaret, just to answer it directly, currently the only consideration we have is the base service at the $15 charge, which is the 10 meg connection. That's probably inadequate for some of the things that children would be wanting to do, especially for schooling and stuff like that. So I think we need to have a further conversation about that, but I think the suggestion has merit, and I think it's something that we should be talking about, so.
And I do think, Mark, I know, involved after our Friday meeting too, I think there are programs that are going to come back from the governor's office that are going to allow us to offer that within this. I think that's going to be something we can, and that tool belt we're trying to create, I think that's going to be something we can, but I love it. I absolutely love it.
So Xfinity has a $10 a month program that probably gets about the same services we're talking about. That's their essentials program. Yeah.
So I get the benefit of sitting next to the attorney, so my question to him and his answer was, that's something we can look at. To me, that's more of a question to the providers, right? So the way I've described this to people, we're talking about putting the pipes in the ground, and you pick your provider. As the utility, we can look into having a provision in there. Any of those providers that want to connect to the network need to provide something like that.
Yeah, thanks for highlighting that, though, and making that on our radar.
Because ultimately, can you bring that up again? I just want to show, there's a couple of quotes I had in here at the end that we didn't get to, but I think would be, play a part in this discussion here, so. So down here, Vint Cerf, who's considered one of the two fathers of the internet, right? He said, government should look at investment in broadband as a national priority. Having broadband access for virtually everyone creates opportunities for the development of the economy that wouldn't otherwise be available. There is a term that's called, digital equity, right? And in the world today, being cut off from the internet is being cut off from everything. You're cut off from the world, you're cut off from education, you're cut off from business, you're cut off from paying your bills. There's almost nothing that can be done without connectivity. And so being able to ensure that not only is there access to everyone in the community, but there's some kind of a mechanism by which connectivity can be facilitated for those that may not have the economic means. I think that's something to really talk about, because it's just, we can't have members of our community that are just completely cut off from that, so.
Okay, I'll look for any further comment at this point. Sorry for the couple of the incidents there. We try to keep this, it gets heated. There's a lot of emotion on this. We understand that.
And thank you all for coming and commenting, asking questions.
Both ways. Like I said, truly both ways. I mean, as Jared's reiterated, there's not.
Well, and please watch for the agendas. As I say, there's lots of decisions that have been made over the last 3 years, and there are many more to come. I don't know that there's going to be, that there's a grand day where we say, here's our pronouncement of everything that's been decided, yes or no. we're making decisions along the way.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, any other discussion? I know we had kind of mentioned, Steve, how we wanted to, how you wanted to do this motion tonight.
I'll just make one more comment. I think that it's important to always know that when you make a decision as a city council member, this is probably redundant to say, but there are always going to be some people that are not happy, right? And I can tell you that literally this has been over 3 years in the making, that we've worked hard on this, investigated, thought about people that would be negatively impacted or just the whole gamut of things. We've tried our very best as a task force to really respect each individual in our community. And so I guess I just want to just let people understand that when you think that it's a done deal, you've already made your decision, it's like we've been going through the process of making this decision for 3 years, and it's not been behind closed doors. These have been open conversations in the public meetings, and it's important for people to understand that the work that's gone on to make these decisions, even though there might be a few people unhappy, which you'd always like to make 100% of the people happy, but I've never found that to be possible.
It's true.
Well put.
A couple comments that I wanted to bring up. If a private company wanted to come do this, why have they not already started the process many years ago, 3 years ago?
Can I just speak to that? One of the companies that was mentioned in particular tonight already has a franchise agreement with the city and could have constructed it 2 years ago, but hasn't yet because, like I explained, without that partnership with the city, their financial models just
Well, in fact, they or any other company could do so at any time, right? What they want is for us to award the monopoly.
Let me clarify that for All West and other people that want to come in. So, we have franchise agreements, and we have different types of franchise agreements. I think All West was awarded the telecom franchise agreement that the council approved. And I think they recently asked for a cable franchise agreement, which is a little bit different. But several months ago, we put a stop to franchise agreements so we could revise our code because our code was outdated as it relates to telecom, cable, and broadband. So we had a DC firm look at our code and make some revisions, so we'll be presenting that to you in the near future.
Is that incorrect to say then that All West was granted a previous franchise agreement under the telecom, and they could proceed forward with construction under that franchise agreement? Is that correct?
For just telecommunications.
For just telecom,
Yeah.
right? And there's a debate, part of the reason we need to clarify our code is there's a debate whether or not telecom and internet are the same thing.
Yeah, because a lot of times they offer a combination of the one or two or three.
Right.
And so we wanted to make sure that we had all those squared up in our code before granting it.
But I think it's important to note also, it wasn't a secret when we sent this out for proposal, and they never brought a proposal. So if they wanted to participate, it was open market for anybody to bring us a proposal. And we got 5, right? 5 companies, so I mean, that would have been definitely the time to come in with your proposal, and they opted not to participate.
And this pause on new applications has been just the last 5 months while we...
Definitely could have happened before.
Anytime.
And Sherry, that was my comment. The next one is, why did they not respond to the RFP? And that's a couple different things. The one thing that I really want to hit home is the opt-out. If you choose to opt out and opt in later, the fees are going to be significant, as in construction, like Steve pointed out. I mean, redoing and undoing, especially fiber optics, you're talking about a very skilled technique to mesh and tie those in, and it has to be a very specific process. But not only that, I mean, $3,600 for 20 years, is that what you said? For 20 years. That's probably going to be the base charge to tie in your house if you opt in later, or you sell your house and the next homeowner wants to opt in, or the business doesn't opt in for the minimal fee of the $15. One thing that I did receive, thank you to the UTA for filling my inbox. And there was about 5 of them that were actually beneficial and in my district. So out of those 5, 2 of them are of a significant age where this would impact them financially. And one is blessed because their daughter pays for the internet. But again, it's $65, $70 that she gets, and she sends an email rather than, she doesn't watch Netflix, she doesn't stream anything. She feels very blessed by her kids. The other one, it would be a significant impact to them, but they still pay. They don't use internet, they don't have internet, they don't subscribe. So it would be an increase to them. I think we'll have some nuances like that, and maybe we have a program or some sort of like this education thing where it's a lower fee or a subsidized fee for those select individuals. And all that's to be determined. And again, no decisions have been made except the continual small steps forward to the final decision of constructing something or entering a partnership with this company.
Yeah, and I just want to reiterate, I don't think that there will be any grand decision to be made at some point. It's a series of smaller decisions. The only big decision would be at the stage where once the utility is established and all these details are done, that utility then would vote to finance the project.
I intend to make a motion tonight that will be the grandest motion that really doesn't move things any differently than where we are. But it's just, it might be the only moment in where we're actually making a formal decision to say, let's pursue the rest of this and finish this up, you know.
And out of all the emails, there's probably 40 or 50 of them. And so 10% were actually valid emails of rebuttals and conversations after education, after seeing a lot of this information and getting the facts, the constituents, and they just understood the process, and they know that there's more to come. And so it was kind of a fun experience to reply to those.
So I'll second Teddy on that one. I received maybe 20 emails from their kind of copy and paste thing. I responded to every single one, and at least 2/3 of them responded with, "Thank you so much for explaining. This makes so much sense now. I'm all for it."
Well, luckily, I didn't get any of the emails, so I appreciated it. So I'm not in a district, so it's been kind of quiet.
mayorpalmer@harriman.org.
The last thing I just want to say, and I don't want to belabor this too much, I think we've...
Every email to every district should also go to the mayor.
Right.
I think that would be good.
And again, I don't want to belabor this too much. I think we've said everything. This came out 3 years ago. I wasn't even on council yet at that time, of course, but this whole thing started because our residents asked for this. We went down this path because overwhelmingly our residents needed options, and they did not. And that's why we're here. We're hoping to give our residents options, create competition. There's no ulterior motives, I think, up here. It's really to just respond to the residents' needs and their wishes at this point, honestly.
You know, you said, as Mr. Marriott said earlier tonight, in reference to, he thought that sometimes we were a little too thorough, is that there were times where we felt like we just didn't know enough. You know, it took us a long time to get educated and understand all the nuances and I mean, we had meetings about topography and different kinds of formats of network configurations and all kinds of stuff. But ultimately, the reason that this has gotten legs in the last several months is, to the mayor's point, it's residents going, where's the options? Why haven't you guys fixed this yet? Why isn't this done? And they've been kind of flogging us to say, get a decision made and move it forward. So that's why this has kind of picked up steam in the last, 5-6 months.
Well, and one of the people up here thinks that he has to be devil's advocate and poke holes in everything and whatnot. So, I mean, all of the questions that have been asked, please go back and watch those meetings and watch us ask those questions and poke holes in it and go through this process of trying to find solutions to everything. That person will remain nameless.
Two more quick points. Marcos brought it up. I live in an HOA, and I'm looking at my streets or the subdivision, like how are we going to get another internet service provider in there? Right now we have Comcast and CenturyLink, like most of the people in the flatlands here in Harriman, and we have decent service. So each HOA is going to have its own little different nuance, and they're gonna have to figure that out with the vendor and stuff. And now I can't remember my second point, but
It was a good one, though.
yeah, it was a good one.
Okay, Steve, I'm going to look to you for a motion then at this point, because again, like I said, there's nothing, I mean, it's the next step, so I'll look for you to make the
So
motion.
just to clarify before I do that is, this has been an iterative process, right? It was, let's say we got a problem with the internet. Let's look at possible solutions. What are some of the drawbacks of those? What are some of the pros and cons? Okay, if this is what we want to do, have anybody else done this? What did they do to mess it up? What have they done to make it work? Are there really advantages to the city going option A versus option B versus option C? What are the costs? How do we protect taxpayers? How do we protect the city? Let's do a survey. Let's get back. Let's have a town hall. Let's interact with residents and get feedback and start putting stuff together. Let's bring it back to the council. Let's talk about it. Let's break it down. Let's do feasibility studies. Let's get that back. Let's revise the models and see if it's still feasible. Let's, I mean, just on and on and on. This has just been step by step by step by step by step to make sure that we were being considerate of so many of these topics, that we were looking out for the interests of the people that we represent to come up with the best possible solution. Saying the best possible solution doesn't mean it's a perfect solution. Doesn't mean it's not without its complexities. Doesn't mean that there's pros and cons of all of the options that were available to us. This one just had the most pros with the least amount of cons of all the options that we evaluated, and I think we explained why. So I would move that as a council, we make a formal decision to accept the proposal that the task force has made, and that we instruct staff to move forward with all haste to bring the proposals for the utility entity, for the opt-out clauses, for the financing steps that need to be taken back to the council as soon as possible.
Second.
Motion by Steve, second by Sherry. We're going to do a roll call. Steve?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Teddy?
Yes.
Jared?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. The motion carries. Again, truly, we do appreciate everybody being here. Rusty, even you, I promise, we appreciate you being here. So, but thank you for the feedback and the questions we've all had, I think, along the way, so we appreciate it.
Yeah, I need help that person needs help poking holes in everything.
Yes. Okay, that brings us to the close of our meeting tonight. Future meetings, our next Planning Commission meeting next Wednesday at 7 o'clock. Next City Council meeting the following Wednesday, the 25th at 7 o'clock. Events, there is a Meet the Candidates night for our upcoming Districts 1 and 4 council races. I will also add on Monday night at 6, there's an orchestra concert here. Is it here? No, it's at Silvercrest. Silvercrest, back at Silvercrest. So Monday at 6 at Silvercrest. They're doing music from around the world. Be really cool. We've got a great volunteer orchestra that does amazing. So it's a great program. Any other events? The breakfast is canceled. I will put it out there because I shared that there was a breakfast at Station 103 Saturday morning. That has been canceled, postponed, I should say. So they'll reschedule that at a future point. Okay, that means.
Did the kitchen break?
No. Venue conflict. Okay, with that, I'll look for a motion to go to closed. So, we don't have their sheet in here.
Magic sheet.
We usually do it. We've never.
We don't do it here.
don't
So
get
it's
through
back.
Go back for a more work meeting.
No
Bear
one
with
thought
us
to
here.
bring it in.
We have to make an appropriate motion. Somehow we still didn't finish till 9 o'clock.
It's okay. It was a good meeting. I'm glad that we changed the policy to where we could really interact more
That was good.
with people too.
Mr. Mayor, if I can say, I appreciate the questions that everyone brought, even ones where we had strong, interactions. I'd say, because all of the questions that are asked are things that we've had to discuss and consider, and I think it's important that we're accountable to everyone in the public as to why we're making the decisions we've made, and to show that we have done a proper amount of research to get to this point. So even the ones that strongly disagreed with us. Some of those points were really valid and things we
Couple
needed to
great
consider.
suggestions.
Very good suggestions too that we're going to take home from this and do some work, so.
Yeah, the other comment I was gonna make, is like, we don't get paid for extra meetings. We don't increase the
We
tax
don't?
benefit. No. All the extra meetings we do, all the extra hours we put in, we don't increase any taxes or pay.
As I explained to somebody, I have a day job, I lose money doing this.
Yeah, and another thing too, as far as a fee being a tax, there's many instances where I believe that it's a fancy name to replace
we've
taxes.
talked about
but
that.
I do not know a single tax that I can opt out of. Not a single one.
I try every year.
Me too.
You can opt out, but
They find you.
three-letter guys come to your house.
I'm going to make a motion to temporarily recess the city council meeting to go into closed meeting for the following purposes to provide, as provided in Utah State Code annotated 52-4-205, strategy session to discuss pending and reasonably imminent litigation, and strategy session to discuss the purpose, exchange, or lease of real property, or to discuss a proposed development agreement, project proposal, or financing proposal related to the development of land owned by the city.
Motion by Teddy, second by Sherry. Jared?
Sure.
Teddy?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
I vote yes. So we will move back into Fort Harriman. We need, who do we need? We need Todd, Nathan, Blake, Wendy, Bryce, Jackie, and council.
We're going to close session.
Jackie does not want to come, so
Jackie doesn't want to come.
thank you, everybody.
I don't know that's